Right now, thousands of commercial planes are tearing through the sky at like 500 miles an hour. And the pilots are doing the exact thing that we beg drivers on the ground never, ever to do. They are texting.
I mean, it sounds completely counterintuitive, doesn't it? But this shift toward text-based communication in the cockpit is actually one of the most fundamental transformations in the history of aviation safety.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to figure out how texting at 30,000 feet is actually saving lives, we went through a massive stack of sources for you today.
Yeah, a lot of material.
Right, we're pulling from aviation safety white papers, deep dive air traffic control manuals, and a really fantastic step-by-step video walkthrough of a pilot using this exact system in a TBM 980 aircraft.
Which is super helpful to actually see it in action.
Absolutely. So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out what CPDLC is, how it practically works when a pilot's sitting up there on the flight deck, and, well, the fascinating satellite technology, specifically Iridium's L-band network, that keeps this whole invisible infrastructure running.
And I think to start, we should probably strip away the heavy aviation jargon. So CPDLC stands for Controller Pilot Data Link Communications.
Okay, quite a mouthful.
Right. But for the general public, the easiest way to conceptualize this is it's basically a highly secure, specialized, and rigidly structured text messaging system built specifically for aircraft to talk to air traffic control and vice versa.
Okay, so to really understand why this is such a brilliant leap forward, we need to talk about the absolute chaos it's replacing. Because whenever I picture a pilot, I picture them with that big headset on, talking over a crackly static-filled radio.
Yeah, that's the classic Hollywood image.
Right, that's what we all think of.
It is. And I mean, for decades, that was the reality. Traditional voice communication relies on VHF radios, and VHF stands for very high frequency. Now, the inherent limitation of VHF is that it operates strictly on a line-of-sight basis.
Wait, meaning literally a straight line?
Exactly. The radio waves travel in a straight line from a grand antenna directly to the airplane. So if there is a mountain in the way, or if the plane flies too far over the curvature of the Earth, the signal just drops out entirely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but honestly, an even bigger issue than the range is the congestion.
Because it's basically a giant party line, right? You have one frequency, and everyone in that particular sector just has to share it.
That is exactly it.
I actually read in one of the ATC manuals we sourced that a busy sector, like over the East Coast, might have dozens of commercial jets, all monitoring the exact same channel at once.
That is the daily reality for these controllers. It's essentially like an old school stock exchange trading floor where everyone is yelling to be heard, but they're all confined to a single radio frequency.
Yikes.
Right. So you have poor radio quality, you've got atmospheric static, and then you have to factor in controllers and pilots trying to understand each other through, well, heavy diverse accents from all over the world.
It honestly sounds like being on a really chaotic group phone call, where everyone is trying to shout over each other in a room with terrible reception, and nobody knows whose turn it is to speak.
That group call comparison hits the nail perfectly on the head.
Mm.
In aviation, the term for talking over someone like that is called stepping on a transmission.
Stepping on it.
Yeah, so two pilots hit their microphone buttons at the exact same fraction of a second. The result on the air traffic controller's end isn't two overlapping voices. It's just this loud, garbled squeal.
Oh, man, so nobody gets heard.
Nobody. The controller then has to figure out who's trying to speak, ask them to repeat the entire message, wait for the readback, and then verify it. It just eats up incredibly valuable time on a congested channel.
And I imagine it leads to some pretty dangerous misunderstandings, too. Like, if a controller says, turn right, heading 250, and a burst of static hits right on the word 2, a pilot might just hear 50.
Which is a completely different direction.
Right. That's terrifying.
And that is exactly why the industry knew a digital shift was necessary to reduce those communication errors in our increasingly crowded skies.
Okay, so I hear you on the radio chaos. That makes total sense.
Okay.
But I have to push back here for a second. We literally have public safety campaigns pounded into our heads telling teenagers that looking at a screen to read and type messages is incredibly dangerous when operating a vehicle.
Sure.
So taking your eyes off the horizon to look down at a screen, I mean, it just seems like trading one hazard for another. Why is texting suddenly a safety improvement? when you're flying a jet.
I'm really glad you brought that up because it's a very natural concern to have.
Okay.
But the key difference here lies in the interface itself and the strict limitations of the system.
Right.
Pilots are not, pulling out smartphones and sending free-form texts with emojis to the ground.
Right.
The interface is called a DCDU, or Data Link Control and Display Unit. It's a dedicated visual screen mounted right in the pilot's primary field of vision. And crucially, they are not typing out sentences on a QWERTY keyboard.
So no sending ATC a message like, hey guys, weather looks a bit bumpy. Can we go higher? Smiley face.
No, not at all. The entire system is built on a pre-formatted menu of standardized phrases, and these correspond perfectly to strict aviation phraseology.
Oh, I see.
So when the controller sends a command, say an altitude change or a new radio frequency, it appears as plain text on that screen, and every single message requires a standardized, menu-driven response from the pilot.
So they just tap a reply.
Exactly. They tap options like will occur, which means will comply, or roger, or unabling. It is precise, it's unambiguous, and it takes only a second to process.
And I assume this answers another question I had, like, why did this take so long? We've had text messaging on cell phones since the 90s, but aviation is just now making this the standard across the board.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm guessing the delay was all about proving this menu-driven system was perfectly reliable and had, like, massive hardware redundancy before they trusted it.
Spot on. The certification process for anything in commercial aviation is intensely rigorous. I mean, you can tolerate a text message to your friend dropping out because you drove through a tunnel.
Sure.
You absolutely cannot tolerate an altitude clearance dropping out.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Which brings up the safety of the voice radios themselves. If everyone is texting now, what happens to the old headsets? Are they just totally gone?
No, and actually the beauty of this digital shift is that it saves the voice radio. By moving all of the routine strategic communications, the route amendments, the basic altitude changes, the frequency handoffs, by moving all that over to the data link, the voice channels are cleared out.
Oh, so they're free for emergencies.
Exactly. They remain wide open for urgent, critical emergencies and immediate tactical warnings. If a pilot has an engine fire, they aren't fighting through 5 other airplanes asking for a weather update just to declare an emergency.
Wow, okay, that is huge. So to really bring this to life for you listening, we need to take you right into the cockpit. Because the video walkthrough we sourced from a TBM 980 aircraft absolutely blew my mind. It proves how this fundamentally changes the pilot's workload during active flight.
Yeah, it's a brilliant demonstration of the daily experience of a pilot using this digital link.
Okay, so picture the dashboard. The pilot starts by logging the aircraft's computer into the data link system. And in this video, they're flying over the U.S., so they log on to the national facility using the code KUSA.
Right.
They hit send on the logon request, and then they just wait a moment for air traffic control to recognize the plane and establish the link. And then a few seconds later, you literally hear a crisp little chime, and an alert pops up on the screen saying ATC message.
And in this specific demonstration, the handshake is actually with Miami Center. Miami confirms the connection, and then we get to see a typical text exchange flow through.
Right, so Miami Center sends a message that says, climb and maintain flight level 222F, which just means 22,000 feet. The pilot visually reads the text, taps the message, selects the standard response, let's go, and hits send.
Simple as that.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The system isn't just a pager. It talks directly to the airplane itself.
What's fascinating here is the integration with the aircraft's flight management system, the FMS. That's what truly elevates this technology.
It was so seamless. Right after hitting so, the pilot just taps another button on the screen that says set altitude. And instantly, without the pilot having to reach up and manually twist any dials, the plane's autopilot system automatically updates the target altitude to 22,000 feet.
It's incredible. And then they receive a navigational command right after that, correct?
Yes. Miami sends a route change. It says, proceed direct bullfrog, which is just a specific navigational waypoint up in the sky. So the pilot taps so, hits an import button, and then hits execute. Boom.
And it's done.
The new waypoint is loaded into the flight plan, and the plane automatically banks and routes itself toward bullfrog.
If we compare that to the traditional radio method, the workload reduction is staggering.
Oh, I bet.
Under the old system, the radio crackles with a complex clearance involving new altitudes and a string of random waypoints.
Hmm.
The pilot, who is, already busy flying the plane and monitoring systems, has to mentally process all that through the static.
Well, flying a jet.
Right. But to grab a pen, write it down frantically on a kneeboard so they don't forget it, key the microphone to read it back over the radio, and then physically lean over to manually type the new waypoints into the flight computer.
Which is just begging for human error. You write down a 3 instead of an 8 because you hit a bump of turbulence, and suddenly you are typing the wrong coordinates into the flight computer.
And that specific chain of events is actually the primary cause of what the industry calls pilot deviations, which is when an aircraft strays from its assigned altitude or its protected route. With CPDLC, the clearance is presented visually, it's verified digitally, and imported directly. The risk of a pilot deviation plummets. In fact, the white papers we reviewed note that during the en route portions of flights, major airlines basically maintain radio silence now.
Really, just complete silence.
Pretty much the entire choreography of the sky is happening silently via data link.
That is an incredible evolution. But learning about this ground-based VHF network created a massive logistical question for me.
Okay, what's that?
Well, I get how this works over land. You have antennas on the ground talking to planes in the sky. But commercial jets fly over oceans all the time. If VHF requires a line of sight to a ground antenna, how does a 777 sitting in the absolute middle of the Pacific Ocean text a controller when there's literally no land for thousands of miles?
That is the million-dollar question. Once an aircraft flies out of range of terrestrial VHF antennas, the system has to adapt. It seamlessly switches over to satellite connections.
Ah, satellites.
Yes. And for aviation safety, it relies heavily on a very specific slice of the spectrum known as the L-band.
Okay, I want to dig into this L-band thing because spectrums can be really confusing.
It can be.
Why L-band? My home Wi-Fi uses certain bands, my cell phone uses others. Why is the L-band the magic frequency for airplanes?
It all comes down to the physics of radio waves. The L-band operates at frequencies typically between 1.5 and 1.6 gigahertz.
Okay.
Now, to put that in perspective, if you are a passenger on that flight streaming a movie on the in-flight Wi-Fi, that system is likely using the Ka or Ku bands, which operate way up around 12 to 18 gigahertz.
Okay, so the passenger Wi-Fi is using a much higher frequency than the pilots are using for their critical text messages.
Yes, exactly. Higher frequencies like Ka and Ku bands can carry massive amounts of data. I mean, enough for 100 people to watch video, but the waves are tiny and they're fragile. They bounce off water droplets.
Oh, I see.
The L band, operating at a much lower frequency, behaves very differently.
Oh, wait, is this like sound waves? You know when you hear your neighbor's stereo through the wall, you never hear the high-pitched vocals of the snare drum. You only hear the deep, thumping bass because those lower frequencies have the power to punch right through solid objects.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. Just like that deep bass punching through the wall, L-band frequencies easily penetrate heavy cloud cover, severe rainstorms, and atmospheric turbulence without losing their signal strength. We call this weather resilience.
So if a plane is flying through a massive hurricane over the Atlantic, the passenger Wi-Fi might completely drop out because the high-frequency signal is getting absorbed by the rain, but the L-band texts from ATC punch right through the storm.
Which is exactly what you need. I mean, if a plane is dealing with severe weather, the absolute last thing a pilot needs is for their primary communication link to suffer from rain fade.
Right, that would be a nightmare.
But beyond weather resilience, the low frequency of the L-band offers a massive hardware advantage for the airlines too.
Because different frequencies require different types of antennas.
Precisely. Because of the L-band's specific wavelength, aircraft can use what were called low-profile patch antennas. They are small, flat panels, maybe about the size of a dinner plate, and they're installed completely flush against the top of the fuselage.
And if they were using those high-frequency passenger Wi-Fi bands for safety communication, they'd need different hardware.
They would. They'd often need much larger, bulky, steerable satellite dishes mounted on the outside of the aircraft just to track the satellite.
Which brings in a massive economic benefit for the airlines. I mean, if you are trying to save millions of dollars on jet fuel, strapping a giant satellite dish to the roof of a highly aerodynamic jet is a terrible idea. It creates drag.
Drag burns fuel, and fuel is an airline's biggest expense. So the L-band provides this perfect combination. It allows for sleek, low-drag patch antennas that save fuel while still providing a robust signal that can punch through a thunderstorm.
Okay, so this L-band is clearly the VIP lane of the sky. But who actually controls this? If it's this vital for preventing mid-air collisions, you can't just have anyone jumping onto that frequency and causing interference.
No, absolutely not. There is a very strict global mandate regulating this. The International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, reserves this specific slice of the L-band spectrum strictly for global aeronautical safety and air traffic tracking.
Okay.
The official designation for this is AMSRS. It is a globally protected lane, ensuring that these critical CPDLC messages never have to compete with commercial data or television broadcasts.
Okay, so ICAO protects the invisible lane, but who paves the road? Who provides the actual satellites in space pouncing these messages back and forth? Are the airlines just launching the run?
No, the global infrastructure relies primarily on two major satellite networks that drive these safety messages. First, you have Inmarsat, which is now part of Viasat,
Yeah.
and their network employs geostationary, or GEO, satellites.
Okay, let me clarify that for the listener really quick. Geostationary means those satellites are parked way out in space, about 22,000 miles away, orbiting at the exact same speed the Earth rotates.
Right.
So to us on the ground, the satellite appears to just hover over one specific spot on the equator.
That is the fundamental geometry of it, yes. And because they are so high up, just 3 or 4 GEO satellites can cover most of the planet. But there's a second major player providing L-band CPDLC, and they take a completely different approach.
Okay.
That is Iridium. Instead of hovering out on the equator, Iridium utilizes a low Earth orbit, or LEO, constellation.
Low Earth orbit, meaning they are much closer to the planet, maybe just a few hundred miles up, constantly zipping around the globe rather than just hovering in one spot.
Yes, and Iridium's constellation is cross-linked, meaning the satellites talk directly to each other in space, passing the data along a web without needing to bounce it down to a ground station first.
So what does this all mean for a pilot flying a route? Like, why does the aviation industry need both equatorial hovering satellites and low Earth orbiting ones?
It becomes critical when you look at how airlines actually route their planes globally. Geostationary satellites parked over the equator have a very hard time seeing the north and south poles.
Oh, because of the shape of the planet.
Exactly. The curvature of the Earth physically blocks the signal the further north or south you fly.
Oh, wow. So if an airline is flying one of those extreme polar routes, say, flying from New York directly over the North Pole to get to Asia faster and save fuel, they literally fly out of the coverage area of the equatorial satellites.
They do. And this is where Iridium's LEO network becomes irreplaceable. Because Iridium satellites orbit much closer to the Earth and actually pass over the poles, their coverage converges at the extreme top and bottom of the globe.
Wow.
Yeah, they provide true 100% global coverage.
So if a jet is right over the North Pole, deep in freezing clouds, and needs to drop altitude to avoid turbulence, that CPDLC text message is bouncing from an ATC center up to a LEO satellite, zipping across the cross-linked web in space, and dropping straight down to a flesh patch antenna on the jet.
Then it all happens in a matter of seconds. When you view it through that lens, you start to see why Iridium's specific L-band technology is so heavily utilized. It isn't just a convenient way to reduce radio static. It is vital infrastructure for the future of aviation.
Absolutely.
And, its applications go beyond just routing commercial flights.
I would imagine search and rescue teams rely heavily on this too, right?
Absolutely. Because that network covers the most remote, hostile parts of the globe, the middle of the ocean, the polar ice caps, it is vital for rescue operations, maritime safety, and coordinating emergency responses where traditional communications simply doesn't exist.
It is just wild to think about this massive invisible architecture supporting every single flight we take. But I know technology doesn't just stop at basic text messages. I mean, we went from texting on flip phones to streaming video on smartphones. What is the next evolution for the cockpit?
Well, the aviation industry is actually already standardizing the next major upgrade. It's a ground-based complement called LDACS.
LDACS.
Yeah, that stands for L-band Digital Aeronautical Communications System.
We've established the L-band is the weather-resilient VIP lane. What does adding the digital communication system part do?
It is going to bring high-speed, IP-based cellular data capabilities directly into the cockpit, utilizing that same dependable L-band spectrum.
Oh.
Yeah, if CPDLC is like moving from voice calls to a reliable text pager, LDSES is like upgrading to a highly secure broadband connection.
So much more data.
Exactly. It will allow for incredibly rich data exchange, real-time weather mapping, constant trajectory updates, and predictive maintenance data, all flowing securely between the aircraft and the ground.
So, to bring all of this together for you listening, the next time you board a commercial flight, Take a second to appreciate the silent revolution happening on the other side of the cockpit door.
It really is a revolution.
We have evolved from a chaotic world of static-filled VHF radios, where pilots risked missing critical numbers just because someone else keyed a microphone at the wrong time. We are now firmly in an era of digital precision. With CPDLC, a controller can send a text, a pilot can tap Willy LCO, and the airplane will automatically update its own flight plan.
Yep.
And this entire ballet is supported by the physics of the L-band, including Iridium's low Earth orbit satellites that punch through severe weather and guarantee a pilot can send a message from the absolute most remote corners of the globe.
It is a profound shift in how we manage the skies. But looking at where this is all heading raises a really fascinating question, something for you to consider long after this deep dive is over.
Lay it on us.
Well, we've seen how CPDLC allows text instructions from the ground to import directly into the flight management system. The pilot verifies it, hits execute, and the plane alters its own course.
Right.
As we introduce high-speed IP-based data links like LDCS, delivering constant real-time trajectory adjustments to the aircraft, are we rapidly approaching an era where the data link essentially flies the routine portions of the route and the human pilots are sitting in that cockpit primarily to supervise the conversation between the computers?
Now, there is a thought to chew on next time you hear that cockpit door click shut. We might just be witnessing the dawn of ultimate hands-free driving, 30,000 feet in the air.